Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Kizer Doberman. Now this is the version in titanium and S35EN. Still a great price tag on it considering what you get, but they also make a less expensive version of it in G10 and 154cm. So I'll make sure and link both versions right down in the description so that you can check them out if you want to. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks so much to Kizer for sending this in for me to take a look at. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this knife. Overall length of the Doberman is coming in at, it's actually pretty big. It's 8.5 inches. Blade length is about, I mean, if you go to the middle of the frame, you're looking at just shy of 3 points. It's about 3.65. Cutting edge is also about 3.65. You can see that sort of lines up right there with the middle of the frame. So pretty good blade to handle ratio. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Any custom scales you see here can be found under Original Goat or Flytanium down in the description. So up against the Cold Steel AD10 and the Demco AD20.5. You can see here that this is, in terms of length, more of an AD10 size knife. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? Let's get a little closer to the size of the larger guy here, the PM2. And then last but not least, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue. And how about the Hogue Deca? There we go. A little bit larger than the Ritter Hogue there. How's the action on this knife? It's pretty good. It's about what I'd expect from Kizer, but it's a little bit something extra going on there. I have a little bit of a, number one, the thumb studs are placed well, and I think it's a good shape for the thumb stud. I also really like that the liner lock is recessed. This is a steel liner lock. It is recessed though, and that's something that I like. Why? On an exposed frame lock, I get frustrated when I, find my natural position on the knife, and it happens to be that I have fingers sitting on the lock bar. Now, as I've said for well over a decade now, the key to making a frame lock work is not putting pressure on the lock bar. That's obvious, everybody knows that. Some designs though, they kind of make it really difficult for you to keep your fingers off the lock bar so that you can deploy it. And I don't like having to think about, I don't have to I don't want to take a tactical position before I start to use my knife. It's annoying, right? So I've come to really enjoy nested liner locks, or locks that don't require you to be very careful about where you put pressure on the knife, right? So I kind of like this nested liner lock. What I don't like is that this knife is not a, well, I mean, it is a flipper, but this nub here that is the flipper tab, if you want to stop on that little nub there, to like if you're going to do like a one-handed disengagement, yeah, it's double clutch, right? The detent ball is not quite up on the face of the blade, and that makes it rock back and forth, and it's annoying. So your next best bet is to let that clear and let the blade fall. Well, the problem is that the best case scenario, the initial sharpened portion of the blade falls down on your fingernail. Now the blade isn't super duper heavy, but over time you'll just keep poking that into your finger, and as you can see there, you might actually crack it, which doesn't feel good. That bothers me. I feel like there's a better way to do that, and I think maybe perhaps extending this area right here would have been a better choice, because the thumb stud is ever so slightly in the cutting path. So extending this choke up position just a little bit more, or maybe even removing the flipper tab completely so that you don't have to worry about bypassing it while you're disengaging it, right? I think that might have been a better bet. For people who don't care about one-handed disengagement, which a lot of people who manipulate knives like this, they like that. There's a benefit to having a knife with a really nice action and really good design. It's because you don't have to think about it too much while you're deploying it and disengaging it, right? You can sort of just turn it and let it fall and put it back in your pocket without having to, think about it much. To some people, that looks like fancy nonsense, and like it's being manipulated like that by the person just for no other reason than to show off. In reality, that's not the case. A lot of us like to deploy the knife, use it, turn it, let it fall into place, or let it close, right? So that we can put it back in our pockets and just be done with it and not have to fiddle around with something like a ring lock or a lockback. Ironically, knives that are viewed as no pomp, no frill, no fuss, but take about 10 times longer to put away, right? I mean, tectonic plates move faster. So don't give me that argument. Anyways, oh boy, I can't wait to read the responses to that. But yeah, I don't like that it's got a little bit of double clutch there, I guess is what I'm saying in a nutshell. Let's do, outside of that though, the action is actually really nice. I think Kizer is doing something a little bit different, and it's very clear here. The D10 is very, very good. Manipulation is good in terms of deploying the knife, and the actual pivot action is smoother than many past Kizers that I've experienced. Let's go ahead and do carry profile thickness up against the Spyderco Pair 3. It's about the same. Length and height up against the PM2 and Pair 3. And this is contoured titanium, by the way, so there's a nice little bonus there. Closed length is probably going to be similar to the Spyderco PM2, and it is. It's almost identical. Height-wise, though, not quite as tall as either knife. Really, a lot of the presence of this knife is going to come in weight. We have a nested steel liner, which is fine. It doesn't need to be titanium with a steel lock bar insert. It's still steel on steel contact, right? Replacing the nested liner lock is not really that big of a deal. It would probably be about almost an identical process to a titanium, lock bar with a steel chip that you replace. I always am a little bit more impressed when they go out of their way to do that, but I'm not going to count them off for that because of the price tag on this, which I think is very, very fair. But we have a nested steel liner lock, we have titanium contoured scales, and then we have a CPM S35VN blade. Milling on the inside is not present at all, except for the milling that's required to accept the steel lock bar insert. Let's go ahead and weigh it. The weight on this knife, I'm going to guess it's probably over 5 ounces. And it is well over 5 ounces. In fact, it's almost 6 ounces. It's curiously heavy. I would imagine a lot of the weight is in the butt. I'm definitely right. The balance point is way back here. Kizer, you should have milled this out. I mean, that's fine. If you like a lot of heft in your knife, well, then there you go. That's going to do it. And believe me, I'm somebody who kind of also understands the enjoyment of something that feels heavy, right? That part of your brain that says, because it's heavy, it's high quality, right? For a lot of us, there's nothing we can do about that. But the truth is that this doesn't need to be that heavy. Kizer, you should have milled this out, at least on one side. We could have shaved, anywhere from half an ounce to 3/4 of an ounce off of this knife and made it a little more balanced and made it feel a little bit more natural in hand. It's not a deal breaker, though. Not really, the end of the world. Let's do a hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. That seems like a T8, but there's a little bit of room there. I wonder if a T9 will fit. Is this one of those weird knives? It is not. This is a T8. So there's 2 T8 screws here. In a lot of ways, and if you're looking at this thinking, that kind of reminds me of the Grambo Russ. Yeah, me too. It's the shape and the overall positioning of the screws, right? I mean, now the Grambo Russ has its own thing going on. I'll let you guys watch that video if you want to. But as far as I know, it's not the same designer unless O.show means the same thing. Maybe there's something I'm missing, and if you guys, I mean, it's just, there's a lot of similarities here. If I am missing something, then please let me know down in the comment section. I couldn't find anything because initially when I opened this up, I was like, oh, this is like a Grambo design. Apparently not. I don't know. It doesn't seem that way. The only designer information on this knife is right here. So, but anyways, we have a T8, and then we have another T8, and then we have the hidden pocket clip screw, which I'm almost certain is a T6. In any case, very, very easy to disassemble and maintain. Just a few screws, some bearings, a blade, and a few pieces of titanium and a steel liner lock. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness on this knife. Blade stock thickness is coming in at 115 thousandths, so not a really thick blade. All right, meat and potatoes time. This is a really simple looking knife, and there's not a whole lot going on with it. In fact, it's the type of knife that I think will be easily forgotten, and I don't mean that as offense to Kizer or the designer, but there's just a lot of stuff out there right now. Just being premium, having good action, right? and good ergonomics is not enough. I mean, if you want the knife to like go down in history. Now, I'm not saying the designer or Kizer, was like setting out to create a knife that would be marked in history or anything like that. But it's the type of knife that easily flies under the radar because there's just not a lot of personality. There's a lot of big open blank space here, and some people really like that. And truthfully, it does create for a pretty comfortable ergonomic grip. Whether you're choked up or you're choked back, I'll hand it to the designer. Was that a little pun there? Because we're talking about ergonomics? Anyway, yeah, it actually is very comfortable and very utilitarian. The blade is, the whole thing is absolutely purpose-built. Still, though, for two reasons. Number one, I like there to be a little bit of character in knives. I'm all for a nice minimalistic aesthetic, right? That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I like there to be a little bit of zazz, a little bit of spice, right? A little bit of sauce with my spaghetti. I kind of, I like that, right? I mean, I don't just eat noodles. What kind of psychopath just eats noodles? That's weird. I want the sauce. I want something here, an inlay, texture, right? Could do one of each, right? You could do a little area that's sort of milled out and you get a little texture milling sort of channel, and then we've got an inlay with something interesting, right? I mean, I always like the copper, carbon fiber, various types of micarta or different colored, even like G-Mascus or something like that. It would have been nice to have something here. Also, I think I would like something, as locked in as I am, I also would like a little bit of texturing just for grip, right? This just feels like a big open nothing canvas, and perhaps that's part of the reason why it's priced as low as it is. Then again, it's a Kizer, so everything is priced like this. I mean, they have, for example, the Huntsman, which is arguably a substantially more complicated knife, and it's about the same price, right? So I don't know. There's just not a lot there going on. To be fair, it doesn't need it. To be functional, it doesn't really need it, right? But I'm a design reviewer, so if a design is like, I'm always really impressed by things that are functional, easy to manipulate, natural, right? In terms of an extension of the hand, but at the same time have not just elements of utility, but it has some kind of wow factor, has some type of, sometimes the wow factor is in the simplicity of it if it's designed that way. This is just straightforward utility with a couple of weird quirks and almost no personality. And that sounds really, really brutal, but that's kind of how I feel about it. And the same sort of extends to the blade. It's not necessarily a super common blade shape, but it's not anything that's like, oh, wow, right? I mean, it's this fully flat ground sort of, what do you want to call this? A modified Pelican's bill? I'm not really sure, but it will work functionally. Has a nice tip, gets nice and, well, reasonably thin behind the edge down here. It's sharpened well, made out of S35 VN, and the final cutting bevel is very even and nicely done, right? It looks good enough. It's a little bit weird, but it looks good enough, and it will definitely function for sure. There's no question about it. The blackwash is, I'm going to be real, blackwash knives, to me, it's about the least interesting finish that I think is available. For some reason, a tumbled black finish just is not appealing to me. And for some people, it is, right? To me, it just isn't. I would prefer a satin finish, which is this next most boring finish out there. A belt satin finish, I would prefer that. I like a full, DLC, flat. I think that looks pretty good. This is just aesthetic preference, not in terms of utility. I like a polished DLC better. I think that looks great. A tumbled, medium to high polish finish, right? Of course, a near mirror, that always looks great. Obviously, they can't do that at this price, but just an all tumbled black finish just looks so blah to me. I also feel like it would be unbelievably easy to lose. I don't know. Maybe I'm coming down a little bit too hard on this thing because, again, it is. I have to keep saying this over and over again. It is a functionally well-built tool, right? It's just blah on top of blah. There's a backspacer that's just there, right? I mean, it's a titanium backspacer. I'll give it that. Lanyard loop. There's a pocket clip that I absolutely hate. I do not like this pocket clip. I don't know why it had to be raised. the exact distance required to include this nub here. Why? Get rid of that and lower the whole clip. I'm so much more aware of this clip because it's been raised to accommodate for that little boat nub under there. I don't understand. Why? It doesn't, to me, I don't gain any advantage there, and it's just extra pressure in the middle of my hand. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's just so confusing. It makes the knife a little more pinchy and a little bit harder to get in and out of the pocket. Not impossible, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just, why? Carry depth is fine. It's about medium. In and out of the pocket, like I said, it's a little pinchy, but you can do it. We have a stop pin that's located internally. It's attached to the blade and rides on channels on either side of the titanium frame. No blade play up, down, left, or right. No lock stick, no pivot lash. Very smooth, very consistent action. Really nice detent, and I think, yeah, perfectly centered with a little U shape on the butt end of the backspacer, which is always a little bit risky because if you're going to do that, it really highlights when a blade is off center, especially right away from the manufacturer. So it's nice that Kizer's getting this right, at least on this one. This knife is $170, which, on paper, the materials and everything, it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's pretty good, right? It's clearly well made. It's clearly Kizer quality. In fact, I think it's got a little extra. The pivot action feels a little better. Very utilitarian. Absolutely a good tool. A little quirky with the double clutch situation, and very, very boring and just not very memorable. I feel like I'm going to forget about this knife literally the moment I stop recording. But then again, that's just, that's very subjective, right? I mean, you guys can tell me how you feel, but for me, there's just not really a whole lot going on here. Honestly, if you're going to pick this knife up, if you like the titanium one, if you're just like, I love the design and I want titanium and S35VN, knock yourself out because the price isn't bad on it, right? The G10 one, I think is probably a better buy just because it's the same thing but less. And to me, they didn't do anything ultra special with the more expensive version. In a lot of ways, the G10 one looks more interesting, right? But if you don't care about the designy stuff, then you might like this, right? There's still plenty of, there's a hand for every knife, right? I'm sure that there's at least a handful of people that, would say this is an absolutely perfect design to me, and I think that's perfectly fine. But as somebody who does nothing all day except for handle knives and comb over every last little teeny tiny detail, this knife is functional and well made, and that's really all I can say about it. It has no other interesting elements, and that's, my preferences might just be different than other people's. So it's fine, it's okay. It's not something I'm going to tell you to rush out and buy. You're not missing anything if you don't buy this, right? But it's good enough, and if you do buy it, I'm sure you'll be happy with it. That's really all I have to say there. Thanks again to Kizer for sending this in. You can check out this knife and the less expensive version down in the description. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.